Hello, I'm Joyce Woodworth. Welcome to the Spirit of the Heartland. Today we're in Kellogg, Minnesota at the home of Lark Toys, one of the most delightful places I know. If you're passing quickly by on Highway 61 between Red Wing and Winona, you may glance southward at one point and see what looks somewhat like a mini amusement park in the middle of a cornfield. If you look a little closer, you'll see a mini golf course spewing pink and blue water over a rock wall and a long, low building that entices you to come in and have some fun. Today we have a chance to enter here and meet the interesting couple who began Lark Toys, hear their story, and take part in a truly joyful experience. Sitting in the carousel room in front of one of the most unusual carousels in the world. And at this time, I want to introduce the creators of the carousel. This is Don and Sarah Kriofsky.
Hi.
Hi, welcome to the Spirit of the Heartland.
Thank you.
Well, now let's start at the very beginning. What is Lark Toys?
Well, Lark Toys is a combination of toys, carousel animals, antique toys, all different things. It started out to begin with just the making of wooden toys, and it slowly progressed into making carousel animals and carving and a destination point.
Now tell me, Lark Toys, I understand, is an acronym, is that correct?
It is the easy-to-say version of Lost Arts Revival by Kriofsky, which is a corporate identity, but way too hard on the phone.
Now I understand you've had this business for a little bit over 20 years, but you sort of began in your garage, correct?
One day we woke up and Sarah said, we're not working during the summer. We should be doing something. I was teaching at St. Mary's College and said, maybe we should do something else. I said, well, let's make toys. We have a little son, just born son, I'll make a toy for him. So I went out in the garage and I made a little pull toy. Well, about a week later, the neighbors wanted a pull toy. And a month later, we were at a craft fair up at Stillwater selling the toys. About 2 weeks later, we had a sales rep. That continued on until finally we stopped 7 years ago wholesaling. We were shipping to 2,500 stores, and we had 300 salespeople on the road. So any toy you'd see, anything in the Smithsonian, to Neiman Marcus, to upper-end catalog companies, those were the toys we made here.
Now you're talking about the toy that you made, but it was a handcrafted wood toy, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. Was it carved? Tell me,
no,
describe
it wasn't carved. Actually, I used a bandsaw to cut it out with. I did a drawing of it, and I believe it was a grasshopper. And so the grasshopper has a hopping motion like this. So I had to take the wheels and put the holes in certain areas and design it so that it would work all the time. And that turned into then a rabbit and elephants and bears riding trikes, pink flamingos, and then we started making larger things. So we started making rocking animals and doll houses and one-of-a-kind pieces. So it just kept on growing. And as my sons became older, there was a cement walkway between the shop and the house. I would give them one of the toys and say, here, pull that the whole length of the way and pull it back and see how it works. So they were my demonstrators for me.
Yeah, they were our toy testers, and it was wonderful.
Well, it was a family affair. How were you
Very
involved,
family
Sarah?
affair. I started mostly with the accounting part, and I did some staining, and now right now I do human resources, but my best part down here is the bookstore. That's the build, that's really the room that I'm the most in love with.
Sarah orders all the books for their well-stocked bookshelves. In here, you can find over 6,000 titles for children of all ages. Don, now I know that you've had to deal with some adversity, and that sort of inspired you, I assume, to begin a career in art. Are you willing to share that with us?
I had polio when I was 3. Spent many months, many years over at St. Mary's Hospital in the Mayo Clinic. But the playing with toys, my parents used to always bring me, they'd bring you little army men and little things to play with while you were in the bed. And so I continued, as years went on, to be interested in the little toys and collecting toys and kind of making things. And they'd give you a paint by number set, and so you'd sit there in bed in the afternoon and you'd paint a paint by number set, and that got me interested in the arts, especially the drawing and the graphics and the printmaking. And then I started getting interested in photography, because one day I took a little plastic dime store toy and I was focusing a camera on it, and I thought, well, this is great. I can take photographs of toys. So everything kind of kept on growing and growing. I went to art school, MCAD, and Master of Fine Arts from the University of Minnesota, and basically building toys and photographing toys when I was at the schools.
Now I'm wondering, Don, if you can be somewhat of an inspiration to some people who may not have the abilities that other people have. Can you say that because you had polio, that might have inspired you to become the artist that you are today?
Definitely, because you're confined to a certain area for a certain length of time. So the art was the easy thing. I could sit for hours and draw and think of ideas and come up with little cartoons and characters, even when I was 5, 6, 7 years old.
So you are actually still making your toys here today, correct?
We make the wooden toys here. We no longer wholesale. We retail right out of the store, the toy store right here. So we still make our pull toys and our puzzles, toy boxes, doll houses, rocking animals. Those are still all made right here.
And that
you can
is
watch
a viewable
them.
shop.
Yes.
You can follow the little map and go to watch through that window and watch the bandsaw cutting and the sanding and the routing, and you get a little smell of that pine through the doorway.
Now Sarah has brought us back into the shop area where all your wooden toys are produced, aren't they?
I brought you into what we refer to as the dust room. This is the room which would have the bandsaws and the sanders and the routers and the bar clamps and the compression things that will take a piece of plain pine like this, once cut into length, allow it to be traced, cut apart, bandsaw cut around its shape, just like cutting out paper dowels, and sanding and routing. And once it's done in here, it's blown off with an air compressor so that no dust goes into the next room behind you. Now there's one man, Tim, who for 18 years has been making these pull toys for us. Don has designed most of them. Tim has taken the designs and turned them into things that will actually turn into toys. Again, we're using clear pine. You will notice there are not a lot of knots in this. Makes it kind of an expensive product, but it makes it oh so much safer. And this machine that you're standing next to is actually a giant squeezer, and it takes layers of wood with glue between and compresses them so that we can create something like this. This turtle is made out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different pieces of pine, like a giant sandwich, allowing its tummy to be hollow, allowing the wheels to turn, which in turn let that head go in and out and in and out. And this is Toby Turtle, my all-time favorite. If I had a fire in my house, this is the toy I would save.
Sarah, do you know how many actually wood toy makers there are in the nation?
Oh, it's a declining number. There are so few. And they may have an American name on the companies, but they're going to be made in China. And we stamp ours actually somewhere on this one, and not all of them. On the wheel somewhere, it'll say Made in Kellogg. There it is.
Okay.
Printed right on there. Made in Kellogg, Minnesota, in our shops.
And your husband is the one who designs all these
Yes.
these movable parts and everything?
And remember, he had told you that a static toy that just pulls on 4 wheels doesn't do much for anybody. But the minute he started playing with cam actions, which is when the axle is no longer in the center of a wheel and it's lopsided, it lets it lope and it lets it run and it lets the ears flip. A lot more fun.
Slowly, as you do something like this, it gets out of hand. And that's what happened with this. It just totally got out of hand, where every year we've been putting an addition up and adding on and making more stores and building more cases for antique toys. It has a life of its own here. So.
A lot of it's customer driven. When at first we were just a factory, it would be a normal thing, and people came in off the road and said, well, I see you're making them, but don't you sell them here? I don't want to have to go to Madison, Wisconsin. I don't want to have to go to Minneapolis. So we put in a very tiny little showroom at first. And then we'd have people drop in who were sales reps and would have wonderful things like hand puppets that would kind of go with our wooden toys. So we added those. Pretty soon the thing began to burgeon, and customers would say, oh, you know, there are some really neat toys out there. You guys would be perfect to have these. And why don't you put in a bookstore or maybe Christmas ornaments or something? And when you've heard that enough and you see the way Claire is doing it, it just sort of happened like Topsy.
Let's talk, Don, about the inspiration for this fabulous carousel. You started with little toys. Did you always have a dream in the back of your mind to build something this grand?
When I went to art school, they said if you can't make it good, make it red. And if you can't make it red, make it big. So I kind of went through the red stage probably a little bit, and then the next stage was the big stage. When I started making the carousel, I thought, okay, we'll just do one animal at a time. And it might end up that it'll be a 5-piece carousel or a 60-piece carousel. And we got to the point where the animals kept on going, and the other business people said, oh, they're going to go under any day now because they're doing a carousel and they'll never get it done. And who can build something that takes 9 years? And people would always come in after we finished it and say, well, you said you were going to build this and we never really thought you would.
Well, I know this is probably one of the most unique carousels in the world. Tell me why it's so unique.
First of all, the wood chisel marks are left. All the carousel animals previous to this had been sanded flat, so you'll see a very smooth look to the carousel animals. The reason being that they wanted them to look carved, but they never thought that leaving the carving marks on, the chip marks, would be okay. And it was a little more, it was harder to paint. The other thing, these are stained. This is not a paint. So we get a totally different look to the carousel. And the animals that were done before this, it was horses, giraffes, zebras, lions, tigers. There were no dragons. There were no pink flamingos. So every animal that I designed was off of something that I had looked at the previous 2 weeks before. So the white buffalo over there was a white buffalo born around here 10 years ago. And so I said, okay, I'm going to have a white buffalo on the carousel. And the Sioux symbol that protects the white buffalo is on the back, the rump of the buffalo. And that protects buffalo from arrows and bullets. The wolf is an Indian medicine man.
So each one of these figures on your carousel has this very special meaning, doesn't it?
Yes. For instance, the otter. Now, the otter is a Mississippi River otter. Back in the 1600s, otters were giant. They weren't small little animals like we have today. The otter also has the Lake Pepin button factory. So they used to make buttons out of clamshells. So it's carved with clamshells, and then all the holes are in it, and then it's inlaid, the saddle, with actual buttons from clams from Lake Pepin. Everything has a little detail that's local to this area.
Awesome.
The pelicans are landing down on the Mississippi River. So one day I said, okay, we're going to do a pelican next. But what do pelicans do? If they don't like something, do they spit it out? Pelican's mouth is full of a little fish. It's eating, but it doesn't like catfish or bullheads, so it spits them out. And that's what's on the floor there, is that little bullhead swimming around to get away.
We get a lot of questions on why our unicorn has no color. It's just plain wood with that blue spiral horn. It's because a unicorn is supposed to be uncivilized and unpainted, and that's why he's raw wood. And once the kids know that, they don't mind that he doesn't have flowers and stars and stripes all over him. But he's our one natural looking animal.
Tell me about the design of the merry-go-round. I love everything about it, your mirrors and the palm leaves. I mean, it's very festive and very pretty. Who designed it all?
Tell her about the, when we were thinking about it being a wedding cake, two-tier deal.
Yes, it was supposed to be two-tiered, so that's why the mirrors up there, it was kind of that wedding cake look that was reflecting things. But then I decided, well, we're not going to do two tiers. Thought of this idea actually on vacation, and I did a little cutout, and I still have the cutout.
Yes, we do.
I have a little cutout, and it's three-dimensional cutout, and it looks almost identical to what I first came up with. Around the rounding boards, those are scenes from the river here. So that it's an eagle, and it's a frog jumping, and it's the cranes.
The large animals on the carousel were all designed by Don, but all carved by one artist and stained by another. The detail we see, for instance, on the pink flamingo is incredible. The carving and the color both add to the design and help bring the animal alive. Each animal is cleverly designed and playful. The ostrich next to the flamingo is pulling a cart, which carries a nestful of her eggs, which happen to be hatching her new babies. The colors are so vivid and artistically incorporated into Don's clever animal designs. We had the opportunity to go back in the workshop of Lark Toys, where Mary Eversman, the artist and stainer of these magnificent animals, is currently working on a large sea turtle.
The carousel took 9 years to carve and paint and finish and put all the mechanisms together and actually to the finished product. This particular piece, I'm just going to show you a couple things. On the carvings, we have left chisel marks. They're all hand carved out of basswood. They're pieces of basswood that are laminated together to form a solid block. After that's to the form close to the design, the wood carver then took hand chisels, literally carved the whole carousel from that style of construction. What I'm using is an oil-based stain. As I paint, I kind of blend or mix the colors as I go. It penetrates deeper into the wood than as you would just using an acrylic or some other type of paint. We've left it rough, textured, for a couple reasons. One, it has a lot more detail that way. Another thing, it actually shows that every piece is actually hand carved. So it really does give it a little bit in a more dimension. Even as it's going around, you see a lot more texture. In the spring then, or in the winter, we close for a couple months. We go through the whole carousel. We touch up any of the scratches or gouges in the wood, touch it up with stain, and then we recoat them. We use several coats of polyurethane, a satin finish on the carousel, some of the saddles and the parts that are being used heavier, then we use probably a high gloss or semi-gloss.
Now the carousel has stopped right here at this deer, and I know you were mentioning something interesting about the antlers on the deer.
The antlers are real. They're a fallen antler, but all the antlers that have ever been on a carousel are real. And the reason being that the grain of wood runs in so many different directions on a pair of antlers that if the child or adult would grab them a certain way, they would always break off. So we put the real antlers on.
Tell me who the wood carver is, and tell me a little bit about him.
His name is Bill, and he's from Wabasha. And he doesn't carve carousel animals anymore. He does his own artwork and sells it in New York, basically.
Most of his carving was actually done at the carver's
Yep.
studio in private on a solitary basis, and these two would have coffee together, and they would sit and talk about how grain lines should go, and Don would sketch things on the back of a placemat or a napkin or an old invoice, and then the carver would go back to his studio with a big chunk of wood that had about the right dimensions for the head or the back, and carve it in private.
Now you were telling me that this is one of the first wood-carved carousels since 1940, correct?
In 1940, they stopped making carved carousel. The carving, the carousel companies had German artisans, many of them that came over. Well, they decided after a while they were good enough that they would go off on their own and start their own carousel business. Well, again, you're talking about an artist and not a business person. So most of them did not make it. So the demise of the carousel. In 1940, there were about 2,500 carousels in the United States working. Now there are less than 60, 70 working. And then they started after the 40s, they went to cast metal. And then, of course, now everyone knows the fiberglass ones that you go to. But you go to the Mega Mall. A lot of those are all fiberglass. Well, what we tried to do was go beyond fiberglass and show if we had done it smooth, everybody would have thought this was a fiberglass. But with the wood chip marks left there, they know it's a wood carved.
And you know, this is really the biggest wood toy he could make. That's why the wood is such a key ingredient on this carousel.
And you have 19 figurines on this
Yes,
carousel.
and one chariot seat, which is a wheelchair.
Okay.
A wheelchair.
Yeah, that's nice because on that one we can pull a wheelchair up to the gate, we can put down a ramp, we walk into that bench seat, lift up the bench and remove it. The wheelchair ramps up, backs in, clips in, and gets a chance to do what everybody else got to do. It's been received with open arms.
This carousel was planned to open June 2nd on my birthday, 9 years later. And that's the day it was going to open. So I never thought about the mechanical part or getting it put together. So one day a big U-Haul pulls up, or a Ryder truck, and here in it is all the mechanical pieces with two guys to assemble it. They get it assembled, the metal part. Well, the night before at 3 o'clock in the morning, all the animals are on and the giraffe is left. And they go put the giraffe on, everything was perfect. Put it on, it's too long, it's too tall. Well, 3 o'clock in the morning, the carver wasn't here, the painter wasn't here, nobody was here, and I was tired, but it had to be on the carousel. Sarah went, I said, get me a saw. And I took the legs and I sawed out a chunk of about 12-inch piece of both legs. So when they crossed, they didn't touch the floor. Well, then I had to glue them together, and then I had to repaint them myself. The next day, we have the grand opening, thousands of people here. As it's going around, I said, Bill, how do you like the giraffe? And he says, looks great, looks great. I said, you notice anything? He says, it looks a little shorter. Normally, I would never have done this to another
Yes.
artist's work.
Certainly.
But I said, Bill, you weren't around. So I had to cut the legs off and glue them back. He says, I just leave them, looks great. So they're still there. Now we call him Stubby.
And he's one of the most popular rides we've got.
Yeah.
Mostly because he's so hard to get onto. He's the challenge piece, and he goes the highest.
Sarah, tell me, what is your favorite piece on the carousel?
The river otter, without a doubt. And I have not yet ridden each of these, but I love that baby. There's a baby otter on the back, just a sweet-faced baby otter. That whole animal to me is just, it's soft, it's rounded, and I like those little clamshell buttons on him. And everybody probably has a favorite. If you were to ask
Sure.
a customer, everybody has one that's a favorite.
Don, what's your favorite?
I think the dragon.
Yeah.
And the dragon, it's the lead piece. I call a lead piece is one of the most heavily carved and heavily painted pieces. So it's the one I spent more time looking at and coming up with ideas. It has a wizard riding on the back. Now it's a big toss-up. When I have a beard, long beard, if the wizard is actually me or the carver, it looks the same way. So it's a debate whether the carver carved himself into it. But what's going to be interesting about it, someday we hope, there are going to be 2 carved bags hanging over the side saddles. And they'll be covered with fireflies so that they glow in the dark at night.
Oh, awesome.
Okay, then they're hollow. And I'll be cremated and maybe a few of my ashes put in it, and Sarah will be on the other side. And so we can ride the carousel the rest of our life after life. So.
You are a man that plans ahead.
Yeah.
There seems to be no end to Don and Sarah's creative and whimsical ideas. Next week, we will join them again as we tour their toy stores and see their collection of antique toys. This has been Joyce Woodworth on the Spirit of the Heartland. Hello, this is Joyce Woodworth. Welcome to the Spirit of the Heartland. In last week's show, we visited with Don and Sarah Kriofsky, creators of Lark Toys in Kellogg, Minnesota. We learned of the start of this magical place, with the making of wood toys to the creation of a one-of-a-kind carousel containing colorful, majestic wood-carved animals. In today's show, Sarah and Don take us through the rest of the building to see their large collection of antique toys and view their interesting, fun-loving toy stores. I understand you even have a couple pieces that you had designed for the carousel but didn't quite make the carousel. Tell me about that.
I have a dinosaur. I thought, okay, now no one's had a dinosaur on a carousel. But this dinosaur, this Stegosaurus, got way too big, we couldn't even move it, it's so big. It takes 7, 8 people on dollies to move it. So
Wow.
It's big. And it's all hand carved and it's hollow inside even. And one of the few pieces that we've done that's hollow. With all of these are one of a kinds. Carousel animals used to be that they would do a horse and then they repeat that horse shape over and over again. So the carver knew what was inside and they could make them hollow. But when we do something, we only do one of a kind. so we could not make hollow areas inside.
Sure.
But this one was so big. Now it's the largest carved carousel animal in the world that's never been on a carousel.
And you don't want to think hollow as in only this thick.
Sure.
It's probably about this thick all the way around,
Around
at
it.
least.
And you still will break through at times because we did not know where we were going. And the same way with the moose. I have a moose here, and it's the kind of the Dr. Seuss moose. It's who stuck its antlers into the bog and came up with gold or fish and otter and turtles, and underneath it, it's full of animals that go around, little turtles and garfish and mallard swimming around. That again was going to go on the carousel, and since it's not the largest carousel in the world, we made it the largest miniature carousel in the world because it has this little carousel underneath it. We've learned to kind of twist what we're doing in our life around a little bit.
And then in addition to these animals that you're seeing right now, there were probably 24 or 25 sibling animals designed one at a time for people's homes. And when that animal was paid for, we'd hustle off to the lumber yard and get more basswood for another one to keep here. So it was the elves and the shoemaker story, but it was just done as a carousel instead.
What is the latest thing that you've developed here at your Lark Toys?
Well, we have a miniature golf course, 18-hole, waterfalls, ponds, streams running through it. We decided when it was nice, or not nice, the people would want to ride the carousel. But when it was nice, they wanted to do something outdoors, and then they wouldn't come here as much. So we decided to build a golf course.
Now, from the carousel room, this building goes on, it seems like forever. Tell me about all the rooms that you have and what kind of toys you have in the rooms and what they all are about.
Sounds great. We always tell people it's a big horseshoe shape and they only see about a third of it from the road because otherwise they truly get disoriented. And we finally created little line drawing maps that says you are here. So you begin hopefully at one end. You pick the end. I always suggest the carousel end. From the carousel end, you can walk around and see the antique toys. You can use a restroom, tank off with ice cream or food or candy. Going to the wonderful Boomer Heaven toy store, which is the grown-ups toy store. Now that's Don's hangout. That's the tin wind-ups and the marbles and the Britons, those beautiful lead soldiers that are hand-painted. All the things that are not safe for kids under 3. The grown-up room and the jumping spider. And once he gets people launched there, he sends them down the hallway a little bit to all the antique toys that round that corner as you lead off into the main hallway.
Oh, there's everything from funny mirrors that they can look at.
There's even a trained pig named Gip, which is pig spelled backwards. And when Sarah says circle, Gip will obey for the reward of a handful of Rice Krispies.
Okay, Gibby, circle. Thank you, Tootsie Dog. Rice Krispies, a healthy treat.
It's a hand-carved troll that lives in a tree house in the toy store. That's Crowell's cousin. Okay, he's afraid of the carousel. but he's the macho one. He has a big heart tattooed on his shoulder. He has a snake up through here. He has pierced ears and everything, but he's afraid to ride the carousel because he gets sick and throws up. So his cousin rides the carousel instead. But as you go in, there's more toy stores. They're all divided up. We carry 192,000 toy items down there alone in 7 different toy stores. We have a science store and a wooden toy store and the toys we make. You can look in windows and see a person working, cutting toys, or maybe working on a carousel animal. And then we have a great children's bookstore with almost 6,000 titles alone in that. So we have a lot of interesting. If you can't find it here, you cannot find it.
Well, I'd love to take a tour and have you show me some of the specialties, and Don, maybe you show me your specialty room where you hang out.
All right, that sounds good.
Wherever you look throughout Lark Toys, you see items of interest. Above our heads in the carousel room, for instance, is a collection of restored pedal cars from the 40s and 50s. Displayed in the rafters of the toy stores, we also see the pedal cars, along with antique bicycles. There's even a small train that chugs along overhead, passing a wooden schoolhouse, a church, and bridges. Sarah points out another large animal that didn't quite make it to the carousel, a beautiful hand-carved wooden hippopotamus. Next to the hippo is another glass case full of antique toys. This one holds toys you may have seen in a little girl's room growing up in the 50s. The hippo stands at the entrance to the Boomer Heaven store where Don likes to hang out. Here the customer can find brand new reproduced toys, copied from toys that may look familiar if you were a kid in the 50s and 60s. It's howdy doody time. We're now in the baby boomer room, standing here with Don, and this is just a great place. It's got all the neat toys that we had back in the 50s and the 60s and maybe the early 70s, like Howdy Doody, for instance. I remember coming home from school and watching him on TV. Here's some dice that used to hang in my boyfriend's car back in the 50s. And of course, the Lone Ranger. Interesting Lone Ranger. I remember watching him on television as well. Don, this is a great room. I bet you have a ball in this room, don't you?
This is probably my most favorite room.
Of
all the
course.
toys, because I get to play with these all day long.
Uh-huh.
So I've got things from the 50s and the 60s and that are still being made. We carry 500 wind-up tin toys. Like this is almost a remake of an exact one. In fact, I have the antique one sitting out in the display case outside. These I purchased from all over the world.
Uh-huh.
So they're German, Russian, Czechoslovakian, Japanese, but they're from everywhere. The tin toys, here's one, an old-fashioned wheel that.
Oh, I remember that
Yep.
one. Yes. Oh, it's great.
And
Okay.
here's another one. All the men will remember this one because they had one back for Christmas in 1950. Bailey, our cat, doesn't like that one especially. But you can see walks along and shoots. Now here's a little earlier one. This is a great one. You take a penny. Let's find a penny, and you put it in the horse's mouth. Okay, I just sold one to a little girl that jumps horses. And you push down the button, and the penny goes inside, and you save that the rest of your life.
Cute.
Because we tell kids they can't open the bank until they're 18 or older.
Uh-huh.
Now here's an old one. Here's another. And a penny. Remember this old coffin bank.
Oh, of course. Classic. What are these called? These little
Well, they
things
used
pop
to be.
out?
I remember them called popping Marshalls. This one's called Bob. Oh, let's see. What else do we have here? Well, now this is a 1950 carnival toy, and it's a paper snake.
Oh.
It's made out of folded paper.
Folded paper.
Yeah. And the kids come in, and I'll pull this out, and they'll scream and yell and run outside. Okay. And then, let's see. Here's another 1950. This came in Cracker Jacks. It was a prize. And if you hold it right and do it right, it's a nose flute. So we tell the kids they can go home and play with their nose all day long and nobody will say anything.
Now you have a certain category of different toys here. Tell me about all the different categories that you have, or a few of the more interesting categories.
Well, again, we have the tin toys, but then we have marbles. We have thousands and thousands of marbles, because marbles are very collectible, of the old-fashioned ones. And we get people that come in and buy one of each, or they'll buy bags, or they'll remember the old games. We have, remember for the boys especially, you used to get some Rice Krispies or Kellogg's, and in it you'd get a little submarine, and you put baking powder in, and then that sub would dive down. Well, they're still making that. They're still making all the magnetic toys, and like you just did the popping little man. It's just endless what they make. Remember the little stretchy animals, Pokey and Gumbies, with the wires in them? They still make them. Those were made originally in Hastings, so we get a lot of people that in high school and college used to make Pokies and Gumbies, and they come in and tell us the story about it.
Okay.
We carry a lot of cars, and that's because we have car clubs booked in here on the weekends. So one day there might be $1 million worth of Packards and Duesenbergs parked on the lawn. Next weekend there might be 600 Corvettes parked out there. So I kind of stock cars that they're interested in. The same way with the old lead soldiers. They still make those, the British lead soldiers, and they're all metal and hand painted. We just carry, you think of it, we carry it.
What do you think the most asked for toy is in this store?
Probably one of them is the old Mr. Machines, and it was a robot that you wound up, and it's sitting right up there, way up high, and all the gears work and everything. It would walk along, but a lot of people asked for that, and they asked for the little black and white Scotties. They were magnetic, and they remember them as children playing with those Scotties.
Okay. Now, what about your lunch boxes? Do you have some old lunch boxes from the 50s? And
We have a whole wall in the other toy store, nothing but lunch boxes. You can get the camping ones, the cowboy ones, the Superman ones, but they're all down there. And we carry a lot of those.
What's your favorite toy in this store?
Oh, let's see. My favorite toy, probably this. Can you see that spider?
Yes.
Okay, now just put it down and pet it very softly.
Oh,
This
it's
is
great. I love it.
The reason it's my most favorite
Is that one with
because I
the
scare.
yes, squeeze
remember the little
balls?
squeeze ball?
Simple thing, yes.
But the kids come up and they bring back other friends to touch it. Just touch it; it won't jump. Well, anything I can
Love it.
scare people with, I love in here. And we carry all the old gag gifts, the flies to the rattlesnake eggs. Remember that can you used to have, and there was a snake in it?
Yes.
A great big wire snake. We have that, and you open it up, and the snake flies up in the air. But they still make those. But they just don't fit in a little 2-year-old and 3-year-old toy store. So that's why this is down here. This is what I call the adult toy store.
Fun place.
And then when you go on, as you keep on going, you're going to find all the other toy stores and that are all different.
Okay, great. Well, I'm going to go look.
All right, good. Good.
The toy stores are all over the place. A jog to the left takes you to the bookstore, and a jog to the right takes you to the science and nature store. Wonderful displays are seen throughout. It's almost like a museum with a giant dinosaur standing impressively in the model dinosaur section. A child can roam from room to room and have a dream for a day. Each room has a hands-on toy displayed where he or she can actually play with the toys.
Here's the turntable. Oh, there he is. Oh, one. It even turns around.
Hey, look at here's a lighthouse.
Sure enough.
Sarah and I continue on our tour from the baby boomer room, past the cafe and all the glass cases containing antique toys for the child's memory inside each one of us.
This was the easiest way to showcase them a little bit. And actually, in these cases are a little bit of everybody's childhood. Some soft, some hard, some metal, some key wind up. A lot of these toys date back even farther, actually than 1945. Some of these are extremely old. Some of the little lead soldiers on the mirror down there are quite early. And some of the older ones back in here would probably go back to about the 1900s. But they represent every kid's toy box. Some guys who only did trains, some women who only did dolls, some people who like tin wind-ups. And I've actually contributed. That little tiny doll in the back is from Czechoslovakia, and the lady who used to babysit me, and I'm 52, used to babysit me, brought it with her from Czechoslovakia and gave it to me when I was about 6.
Where do you get most of your collections from?
We started by going to antique stores and estate sales to get them. And of course, Don's mom saved his, so those were the anchor of the thing. And then since then, we've gotten donations from people who had something that maybe nobody in the family understood or liked, and they wanted it somewhere somebody could see it for all time, basically for all time.
Sarah, how many old toys do you actually have?
If we had to add these up, this case and the ones around the carousel in the hallway, we're probably in the area of about 26,000 different antique toys.
They're amazing. I mean, I love just walking through, and there's certain ones that remind me of my childhood. Like I see you have paper dolls up there. That was my favorite thing to collect when I was
And isn't
little.
it amazing that there is still an actual set of those left? I mean, we
Yes.
know what we put those through, greasy hands and the little head started to flop and stuff.
Right.
And those are called ephemera. Paper toys are called ephemera because they're by nature not long lasting. And it's very rare to run across those in any kind of shape at all.
All right. Then you have a lot of wind-up toys too, like
My
your
favorite
merry-go-round.
thing, I love these key wind-ups. And in most cases, they have the keys or we have found keys that work for them. And it's a clockwork mechanism. It's just something inside that winds up really tightly when you wind it, and as it expands and relaxes, it drives the toy forward.
What are some of your favorite ones here in the toy collection?
Probably, and this isn't even a wind-up, this is E.T. with the little heart, and I know he's current, he almost doesn't belong in here, but I love that movie, and I love that my kids love the movie, and we found him at a garage sale, so we got him, we put him on the table, and he's kind of the bridge between present and past for us.
Okay. Well, let's take a walk down your hall and see
Sure,
what
you
else
bet.
you have here.
You bet.
This is a nice display case right across from the entrance of your building.
You bet. First thing you see sets the tone right off the bat.
Looks like a lot of robots in this case.
It did. Used to contain all the robots, and now we've kind of split it up. But the fun one on the top is the special Mr. Machine that you and Don were talking about. Kind of a really early robot. And we have another one on the bench that you can activate here. This is the new reproduction of the old one in the case.
And here's
Just move
the
that little blue
arms.
lever and look at him go.
Yeah, he's classic. So where did you find this new one?
This is a company that's bringing back Ideal Toys, is bringing back some of these now.
Oh, you have a lot of these kinds of things in your toy store, don't you?
Everybody who has a toy from their childhood wishes somebody would bring back something. And this was a nice one.
Don was saying that this is the most asked for toy
Yes,
that he has.
this is the most memorable, I think, because of the color and the talking and the gears. You remembered this if you were a kid, and it was a big present. If you got this, you were doing well.
Ooh, what year was it? I sure don't remember
I would have
this
said
one.
the 50s, but Don would know for sure.
Sarah, what are these things hanging over here?
Oh, our magic troll charms. These are, you'll see customers wearing these around their necks. There are 3 wood burn dots on here. Our magic troll has 3 big toes. And to keep him in his rafters without doing mischief to you, we created these with a little slash mark through it, so he has to stay up while you're in there, and he can't do anything to you. But you wear this while you're here, and you should hang it up when you go home, because otherwise your zucchini might winter over, and your new phone number might start with 1-900, and Camp Snoopy might turn into Wally World, which is an allusion to that movie with Chevy Chase, who traveled across the country to the amusement park, and it was the week they were cleaning the park. So people will usually leave them here, and if they don't, they mail them back. And I'll get thick little padded envelopes, maybe 10 a year, no return address, just the troll charm coming back so as not to tempt fate.
Sarah, let's take a look at that nasty old troll up
You
on the
bet,
rafters.
You bet, he's way up high in here.
Well, Sarah, I see Crawl, the magic troll, way up in the rafters
He
up there.
is.
It looks like he's fishing today.
Did you get where he got his name? That's Lark spelled backwards.
Okay.
Remember, this is the legend of things that turn around mysteriously, and I know you noticed some other places that it's backwards, too.
Well, I did. I noticed some interesting things. I hear it says Gulek, but that, I'm assuming the arrow is pointing towards Kellogg.
That's right, our mighty tiny town of 643 people.
Oh, what is this big rubber thing right underneath
this
it?
troll has to have a way to get around at night, so we gave him slingshots. So he has a slingshot in several places in this room and propels himself. We've never seen it, but we think it happens.
Now, Sarah, give us an example of some of the toys you can find in this toy store.
Sure. This toy store is actually the main classic children's toy store. So this would probably encompass all ages. Little kids, older kids. Lately, kids who are into dinosaurs and dragons and all the little play figures, the kind of the ones that Don had when he was bedridden for so long. And we love them because there's so much imagination. There's not a battery in these guys. You set it up, you make the story, you make it happen. And we carry hundreds of these little play action figures for moms and dads to give the kids that want to do this.
Ooh,
They're
and
awesome.
I love these.
Oh, and you have the green sea serpent, and I have the Chinese dragon. These are puppets. And as a teacher, I look at puppets as being a whole lot more worthwhile to play with because you make up the story. You become the actor or the actress. And lots of places here to put your hands. You and I have chosen 2 big pieces. Now I have a tongue, and I've got a mouth, and I can get your dragon. Of course, the kids always want to attack each other.
Oh, of course.
But this is
That's
the
what you wanna
luxurious
do.
Chinese New Year
Beautiful.
dragon, and you have the sea serpent.
Absolutely beautiful.
Gorgeous things, aren't they?
Yes.
And not everybody wants something quite as large as this one.
Ooh, I would.
You and I think the same. Take a look at this story. Now, when I do field trips with little kids, and I have them all sitting in a circle on the floor, we'll talk about the story of Little Red Riding Hood. And we ask the kids if they know who this is. Yes, they know it's Little Red Riding Hood. Well, do you remember who she's going to see?
Ooh, her grandmother.
Good for you. You remember. Here's Grandma.
Oh, there
Now,
she
Grandma,
is.
though, was having some
Yes.
problems with that. Do you remember what happened to Grandma?
Ooh, the bad wolf.
Ooh,
Ate her
look.
up. Oh, no,
Here
there
he
she is, all dressed in Grandma's garb.
That's right. And then we just make it backwards
Cute.
and put everybody back together again, ending happily like this.
Oh, that is
The
darling.
storytelling dolls
Yes.
are just magic.
Darling.
There are probably 8 or 9 different ones of those. Now, in the wintertime, we get school field trips, and of course you haven't seen anything but white for months and months and months. We tell the kids these are the magic blooming flowers. And it's like paper that their mom makes muffins in, but it's pleated. And it's a Chinese toy, and you invert it.
Oh,
And
simple.
then when you're ready for it to bloom, you tap it on your fingers, and out all those flowers pop.
Oh, lovely. Oh, that is so
You
cute.
can do it over and over and over again.
Oh,
Just
how
make them bloom.
unusual.
Isn't that neat?
Yes, that is so cute. Beautiful.
Beautiful stuff. And then, of course, the inevitable tops, and now we can even make tops out of butterflies. Give that a spin right here. Very good.
Oh,
Very
lovely.
well done.
Uh-huh. Oh, I've had experience spinning tops, believe me.
And if you have a sister with children and you'd kind of like to get back at your sister, you give all those little nieces and nephews a pop gun. And of course, the first thing you do is you say, don't point it at anybody. So, of course, they shoot at the floor. But these are classics that have never gone away. Not a battery in this room.
Wow, what a fun store.
This is awesome. This is classic stuff. And if I ever have grandkids, this is the kind of thing I want them to have.
It is awesome. Lark Toys, built on a lark by Sarah and Don Kriofsky in Kellogg, Minnesota, offering a truly joyful experience for all, has become a destination for thousands of people. I'm Joyce Woodworth. Thank you for joining me today on the Spirit of the Heartland.